component. I don't believe we're big boned or have slower metabolisms, but I do believe hunger varies by individual. Some people can reduce their calories by 500 a day and barely registers. Some people are ravenously hungry, dropping a few hundred calories a day. I fall into the latter category, so I really had to work at this, and that's what this training is all about. How to hack your hunger to work for you, not against you. So real brief sciencey overview, the yin and yang of hunger are two hormones. Ghrelin, it's like a gremlin, it's the bad one. I can never pronounce it correctly, but that's the signal that I'm hungry, let's eat more. And that often increases dramatically in some cases when you reduce calories, when you go on to a diet. Whereas leptin is that, oh, I'm full. It suppresses appetite. And we want to try to strike a balance there. You can't fully control this. When you reduce calories, naturally you are going to get some hunger, and these hormones are going to kind of yin and yang, so to speak. But we want to make sure it's a tolerable amount of hunger. So there is real differences here. Some people's in research, that gremlin hormone, I'll just call it that from now on, barely changes when some people go onto a calorie restricted diet. Others experience fairly extreme hunger signaling, food noise, as they call it. And it's often tied to this hormone. So it's not willpower, it's biology. None of us have more willpower than others necessarily. It's often tied to this balance. Yeah, even in this one research paper, I think it was 12-week study, obese women, varied hormonal responses. Some experienced less ghrelin, found dieting fairly easy. Others had really heightened and struggled more. So what gives, and how do we kind of get you into the category of people that more naturally don't have the appetite increase? All right. So 4 fundamentals, you guys already probably know these. We make them a real focal point of our process. Type of 1 in the chat, if all these are kind of familiar to you, protein at every meal. It does reduce that gremlin, particularly in the AM. So that's where the challenge is with fasting through your first meal. You're going to have a hard time regulating that hormone. Definitely sleep. It's the foundation of everything. Everything goes haywire when you don't get enough rest, cravings included. Strength training, there's some research that it regulates appetite better. I just find muscle is a storage sink for excess carbohydrates. And when you break them down and build them up, you need those building blocks. And if you just do cardio, you don't have that muscle retention, that muscle sink, so to speak, for more calories, more carbs. And then not going too aggressive with both cardio and calorie cuts, because that's when things hit the fan. All right, good. Didn't see too many ones, and it's all new information, I guess. So here are the strategies. Believe it or not, you're gonna have to accept some hunger. It's not a 10-bell emergency to have a dull hunger pain in between meals. We need to kind of reframe that's actually your body fat being lost. So, oh, that's a good thing. That's a good sign. The plan is working. 10 on 10 hunger all the time? No, but learn to sit with a little bit of hunger without immediately like trying to act on it. Now that said, like I said, too much hunger means you're pushing too hard, making poor food choices. And that's going to be another strategy here shortly. But try to reframe a little bit of hunger as, oh, that's my body fat stores shrinking, right? That's a good thing. That's what you're all after. Increase fiber intake. So this one, generally between 20 and 30 grams a day. It's a tough blanket statement to make because some people actually find it's counterproductive to regularity to eat too much fiber or certain types of fiber. But from a dieting perspective, it adds bulk, slows digestion, just makes you full for longer without adding really much calories at all. Okay. So fiber content, common foods. Certainly, if you want to just throw some chia seeds and things, kind of factor in the calories with those. But your typical greens, there are the Metamucil, like over-the-counter supplements that may or may not make sense if your diet's devoid of fiber. But try to get in the habit of fruit and veggies as consistently as possible with every meal, and then mix in some fiber, starches, that kind of stuff. Good. Along those same lines, And this one's fairly obvious as well, low calorie, but high density. So lots of volume on your plate, but not a lot of calories. Think a big ass salad, a sandwich that's light on the sauce with a lot of chicken on it. Any kind of protein is going to fit that bill, especially if it's like reduced fat versions. Okay. All right. Helps with feeling fuller along the same lines as and you may have seen this from Monday's message, Snickers bar versus an apple, fairly similar amounts of time to eat. One contains 5 times the calories of the other, right? So fairly straightforward that, jump around. 5 apples versus 1 Snickers bar. Maybe from a taste perspective, there's an argument there, but certainly one's going to make you feel fuller. It's going to have more micronutrients, healthy stuff, and more fiber. Number 4, ultra processed foods, junk foods. I don't like the word junk food, but trying to minimize it. The stuff that is probably too high in calories without really filling you up. A donut, for example. Like you can finish off a Krispy Kreme in 3 bites. A lot more calories to that from both carbs and fats than, say, a chicken breast with similar total calories overall. All good so far? Making sense. Thumbs up. Type a 1 in the chat if you only have access to chat. There you go. I don't want to be preaching to long here. Good. Excellent. All right. Almost there. So what is ultra processed? Well, that one should be fairly obvious. Anything that has a barcode in a box with a million ingredients, certainly qualifies. But what's the difference between processed and unprocessed? Well, processed would be more like a protein bar, something that's a bit manufactured, might be a little healthier. And then completely unprocessed is the chicken breast, the single ingredient stuff that doesn't have a bag, barcode, or box, and trying to strike that right balance. Okay. So people just consume a lot more food without the hunger signaling or fullness signaling that you get from Whole Foods when you eat ultra processed. And it's quite a significant difference, like extra 500 calories a day in those who ate mostly ultra processed foods. So on that same note, just think of that 80-20 rule. If 80% of the food you put in your mouth is whole food, single ingredient, by definition, nutritious, and the other 20% is the fun stuff that you can kind of moderate, you'll be just fine. Okay. So slow down. This one's particularly difficult because a lot of us eat on the go nowadays, but even taking 10 minutes instead of 5 increased those fullness hormones we talked about off the top, like leptin versus the gremlin, right? So try to eat in an undistracted state, not watching a scary movie or responding to email where you're mindlessly just throwing things in your mouth. We've talked about this with Diane on previous calls. Maybe consider chopsticks. If you can't slow down your eating, have some tools or strategies to force yourself just a little bit. 10 minutes versus 5 minutes. We're not asking you to sit there painfully chewing one piece at a time, but it's going to help. There was even research in twins way back. I don't have all the specifics of it, but the one twin they forced to eat slower, and the other twin just ate at their regular pace. And because of the saliva and the breakdown of the food, they digested more, they lost more weight over the time frame of the research. So kind of interesting. And we all have that friend or family member that's the slowest eater that seems to eat quite a bit, but looks kind of skinnier than they probably should be. There's some merit for that, for sure. And at the same time, we understand like minimally processed foods just require us to chew and work harder at eating it, right? The whole potato versus the potato chips, the steak versus the burger. The steak, you got to cut and chew constantly, and burger goes down a lot faster. All right. So when those cravings hit, be able to swap it versus suppressing it, right? Not just sitting there staring at the pantry isn't going to work, but go for a walk, mental stimulation, engage in hobbies, socialize. Like I talked about conversation over consumption. When you go to social events, try to get in the mindset that you're not just there for the food. It's just a component of the night, right? And always have something to keep you busy. Because if we have idle hands, we tend to have hands full of junk food. Okay. So summarize, accept some hunger right off the hop. It's not going to be a forever thing. Once you get to your goal weight or whatever the target is, you can kind of shift yours to maintenance calories, and by default, you'll be less hungry when you're eating more, but you have to accept some hunger on the way down. To negate some of that hunger, increase your fiber intake, choose that high density foods like the salad in this picture, minimize the ultra processed stuff that you can just wolf down without even feeling full. And then try and get in the habit of eating a bit more slowly, putting your fork down between bites. If it takes going to extremes, chopsticks, and then stay active and engaged to prevent that eating out of boredom, that snacking, that leads to binging. All right. So essentially, all the basics work best. Smart choices. Make it easier on yourself by eating whole foods that are filling. Exercise the right amount, the Goldilocks rule. You can go to extremes with this, and then you're ravenous all day long. But 3 strength workouts, 8,000 steps, like we talked about, those things aren't going to have a negative effect on that. And then sleep, stress management, all those things are ultra challenging at this stage of the game, still play a huge role. All right, let's stop sharing. Let's jump in. What was the biggest takeaway or action step you're going to take from this? Either unmute yourself or write in the chat. Once you put it out there publicly, you're likely to follow through. So let's hear it from everybody. What we got here? Who was paying attention? All 6, 8 technically. We've got fiber drained. Cool. Which, how would you increase your fiber? Do you have some ideas, or we can help you with that? I guess you're typing. You don't have to just type it if you're on that wavelength. That's fine. Looking for ideas. Okay. Yeah, so the most obvious is to try to have every meal with either a starchy, fibrous carb or a fruit. And then vegetables should make up a big component too, right? So like half your plate is fibrous fruit or starch, and the other quarter of the plate, sorry, quarters, we'll call those quarters because protein needs to be on there too. And that'll be your vegetables. And that should get you into that 20 plus grams a day. I like protein bars here and there because they do come with fiber, not as quality of fiber, but fiber nonetheless. Period. You have a list of foods that are high in fiber. Yes, I should have something along those lines. I even put a small one in this presentation, but I can definitely come up with a more in-depth one. Cindy, does water curb hunger or increase satiety? Yes and no. It seems to be a bit individualized, but I like people to drink enough water so that they can tell the difference between thirst and hunger. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate. So by hitting your water goal by default, you should be kind of addressing that confusion. I like water with meals and before. There is some evidence that leads to reduced overall calorie consumption. And there's so many benefits to doing it. So not going to make or break appetite. It's not a GLP-1 drug that just tanks appetite, but water, fiber, all these things work together to support reducing it. And make sure you're hitting your protein goal. That's the big one, which I'll continue to preach about. All right. Anyone else? Didn't hear from everybody. Let's get a few more takeaways. Strategies. Chad, waking up hungry throughout the night. That would be indicative of potentially eating too far away from bedtime. And there's a sweet spot, right? Like the 10-3-2-1 rule we talk about. 3 hours out from bedtime is probably your last meal, last feeding. But depends on how big a meal that was. I like to kind of take the hunger off so that I can fall asleep, but not so full that, I'm getting acid reflux or it's affecting my ability to fall asleep. So a bit of trial and error there, but I would think 3 hours out, no more than that. Have either your last meal or a protein dense snack. And carbs I tend to save for the evening because they increase serotonin. They actually help with onset of sleep quality. So those who are like on low carb meal plans, they don't eat any carbs in the evening, they tend to have a harder time falling asleep, staying asleep. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, Carrie, I like that 80-20 rule. I always put things into two buckets: nutritious foods, fun foods. You can have a little of these, but not too much. Make this the foundation. It's going to fill you up. It's going to help you reach your goals. I think that was who was on the call last week that said, yeah, my protein goal helps me get to my goals. Doesn't necessarily always address your taste buds, but I prefer going after the goals more often. So that's why I hit my protein target. Delayed gratification at the end of the day. All right, a couple new faces on here. Jackie, anything on your end? Good to go. I know you're in the car, so it might be easier said than done to chime in. That's okay. Okay, Cindy says, protein more important than calorie cap. From a hunger suppressing perspective, I would say yes. From a fat loss perspective, I would say no. Calories in, calories out is still like the standard. That's going to lead to either weight gain or weight loss. And the protein just helps with the composition of what we lose. It supports strength training and minimizing the muscle that we lose in pursuit of weight loss. Because without the strength training and the protein, research shows, even with the new drugs out there, like as much as 40% of the weight people are losing is bone density, muscle, both critical things we want to keep around. So that's why we make this program as much about preserving the good stuff as losing the bad. Yeah, Sharon, when do you feel you get hangry? Is it emotionally triggered? Is it too much space between meals? Something else? Because then it's just about having kind of a strategy or minimizing the scenarios that we get into with that. Work issues, yeah. Yeah, we can't fire our bosses or whoever's kind of triggering the response. What I tend to do, and in the morning, typically, if I have a coffee and I'm not eating, my cortisol just spikes and everything is more triggering, and I certainly get hangry. So I have now kind of shifted my meals to have a really high protein breakfast. It's a smoothie, bunch of greens, 2 scoops of whey. That takes that edge off, and I don't get that mid-morning hanger. So you may want to experiment with your first meal of the day to avoid that fate. And stimulants or caffeine could put you in a position like that even more so. So hopefully that helps. Try it out, Ed. Play around with meal timing. All right. Anyone else? You don't just need to use the chat too. You can always unmute. That works too. Feel weird talking to myself. That's okay. All right, going once, twice. Good. I think we'll see a few of you at our big retreat on Saturday. If you're not aware of what that is, drop a message. We do have a couple sit-in spots free of charge, of course, for the morning sessions. But the afternoon circuits, wellness circuits are booked solid, or else we'd be there all day long. So should be a lot of fun. If not, no worries. I know people have lots of things going on, so appreciate those who signed up, and we'll chat again in the app and next Wednesday. Sound good? All right, leave it there. Appreciate it, guys. I'll send out the replay once it renders. Have a good rest of your week. Go Jets, go.